They told us humanity didn't belong in the coalition. They said our bodies were too frail, our instincts too dull. But when the blast doors locked and 50 tons of frenzied, armor-plated predators charged, they didn't see prey. They saw something ancient. They saw their alpha. And they knelt. The air inside the atmospheric staging room tasted of ozone, sterilized metal, and cold sweat. Captain Sarah Jenkins stood before the reinforced, transparent aluminum blast doors, her breathing slow and measured. The heavy rhythmic thud of pacing claws echoed through the thick glass, sending subtle vibrations up through the soles of her Lockheed Martin Mark IV tactical boots. Beyond those doors lay the arena, a sprawling, kilometer-wide subterranean biome constructed on Kepler 186F, the Joint Military Command Center of the Orion Coalition. It was a brutalist masterpiece of xenobiology and warfare, designed specifically to break cadets. Today, it was meant to break humanity. Heart rate is at 65 beats per minute, Captain. You're eerily calm for someone about to walk into a slaughterhouse, a voice crackled through her earpiece. It was Dr. Arthur Pendleton, the lead human xenobiologist stationed at the base, observing from the safety of the suspended command deck above the arena. "Fear is a luxury I left on Earth, Arthur," Sarah replied quietly, adjusting the kinetic dampeners on her forearms. "How are the telemetry readings looking on the Boston Dynamics neural link?" "Stable for now," Arthur replied, though the hesitation in his voice was palpable. "But Sarah, you need to understand the anomaly we're looking at. The beasts they've loaded into Sector 4 aren't standard adult training drones. They are the newly acquired juvenile brood from the Tartarus sector. They call them cubs, but don't let the name fool you. A Tartaran cub is the size of an earth grizzly, heavily plated in subdermal bone armor, and possesses a bite force capable of snapping titanium. They are entirely feral, unbroken." Sarah looked up toward the observation deck, obscured by the glaring stadium lights. She knew who was up there, watching her every move. Director Thomas Wright, the Coalition's primary integration overseer. Wright was a purist, a man who believed that humanity's entry into the elite interstellar ranks was a political misstep, a concession made to an inferior species merely because Earth held strategic space lanes. He had engineered this specific trial, a live taming exercise, to prove exactly how fragile human biology was without the crutch of heavy orbital artillery. "Wright wants a show," Sarah murmured, checking the seals on her environmental suit. "I intend to give him one." Up in the observation deck, the atmosphere was tense. General Richard O'Neill, the highest-ranking human officer on Kepler 186F, stood rigid, his hands clasped behind his back. Beside him stood Director Wright, nursing a cup of synthetic coffee, a smug, relaxed expression etched across his face. "General O'Neill," Wright said, his voice dripping with false sympathy, "I must commend your Captain Jenkins's bravery. It is admirable. Foolish, certainly, but admirable. The Tartaran brood has already hospitalized 3 of my best multi-limb cadets this morning. What makes you think a soft-skinned biped can achieve dominance where apex warriors have failed?" O'Neill didn't look at Wright. His eyes remained locked on the tiny figure of Sarah standing in the staging area far below. "Because, Director, you mistake physical density for evolutionary superiority. Humanity didn't conquer Earth by being the biggest or the strongest. We conquered it by understanding the beasts that hunted us." Wright chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "Understanding won't stop a Tartaran jaw from crushing her spine. The trial requires her to isolate a single cub, attach the neural link collar, and force it into submission. If she attempts to run, the pack will flank her. If she attacks, they will swarm. It is an exercise in overwhelming biological dominance. Down below, the staging area bathed in a flashing red light. The 1-minute warning. Sarah closed her eyes, running through the xenobiology files she had memorized over the last 6 months. Tartaran predators were pack hunters, highly social, highly lethal. They operated on a rigid hierarchy, communicating through infrasound and pheromones. The coalition trained cadets to beat the beasts into submission using electrified batons and concussive blasts, enforcing dominance through pain and fear. But humanity had a different history with wolves. 30 seconds, Captain. Arthas's voice returned, tighter this time. I'm looking at the environmental readouts. Something's wrong. The ambient temperature in the arena is rising rapidly, and the ventilation system is pushing a heavy chemical mixture. Wait. It's a hyperstimulant. Sarah, the atmospheric controls have been altered. They're flooding the arena with an aggression-inducing synthetic pheromone. Sarah's eyes snapped open. Right? It has to be, Arthas typed furiously, the sound of his mechanical keyboard frantic over the comms. He's trying to induce a blood frenzy. The cubs won't just be aggressive, they'll be completely psychotic. I'm overriding the doors. I'm aborting the trial. Access denied. A cold, automated voice echoed through the comms. Arthas, what was that? Sarah demanded. He locked me out of the mainframe, Arthas shouted. Sarah, you can't go in there. The neural link collar won't work on a beast in a chemically induced frenzy. It's a death sentence. Before Sarah could respond, the heavy blast doors hissed, breaking their pressurized seal. The heavy steel ground against the floor, parting to reveal the sprawling, dimly lit expanse of Sector 4. The air that rushed out was hot, carrying the thick copper scent of blood, ozone, and primal musk. There was no turning back. If she refused to step forward, it would be recorded as a failure, a permanent stain on humanity's application for full military integration. Wright would have his victory. Sarah unholstered the Boston Dynamics neural collar, letting it hang loosely from her left hand. She didn't draw her sidearm. She stepped over the threshold, her boots crunching against the synthesized gravel of the arena floor. Behind her, the blast doors slammed shut, locking with a definitive hollow boom. The arena was vast, modeled after a dense, rocky canyon system to simulate the Tartaran homeworld. Shadows stretched long and deep behind massive synthetic boulders. The silence was absolute, but it wasn't the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of a hunting ground, holding its breath. Cool. Sarah walked forward, her posture relaxed, deliberately suppressing the instinct to hunch her shoulders or dart her eyes. Predators tracked fear. They smelled cortisol. Thanks to intense biofeedback training provided by the military's Advanced Psychological Warfare Division, Sarah maintained a heart rate of a seasoned sniper. A low, vibrating hum resonated in her chest. Infrasound. They were already communicating, coordinating their strike. Suddenly, a blur of motion erupted from the ridge to her right. A Tartaran cub breached the skyline, a terrifying silhouette of muscle and plating. It stood roughly 7 feet tall at the shoulder, boasting 6 powerful jointed limbs that ended in scythe-like talons. Its head was a nightmare of evolutionary design, elongated, armored, with a jaw that unhinged like a serpent's to reveal rows of serrated obsidian teeth. Then came another from the left, and 2 more from the front, 6 cubs in total, stepping out from the shadows, their eyes glowing with a toxic, chemically induced yellowish-red hue. The hyperstimulant Wright had pumped into the arena was evidently working. Thick strands of saliva whipped from their jaws as they snapped their teeth in agitation. They were shaking, muscles twitching involuntarily, overwhelmed by the artificial bloodlust coursing through their veins. In the observation deck, Director Wright leaned forward, his hands pressing flat against the glass. "Look at them," he whispered in grim fascination. "They are completely consumed. Tell your medic to prepare a stasis bag, General. There won't be much left." O'Neill gripped the railing, his knuckles turning white. He keyed his private comms. "Pendleton, get those doors open, now." "I can't, sir," Arthur's panicked voice echoed back. "The firewall is military grade. Someone used a Lockheed Black Site encryption key to lock the system. I need at least 10 minutes to crack it." Down in the canyon, the pack began their closing circle. This was the kill formation. They moved with terrifying speed, their 6 legs propelling them forward in a seamless, fluid sprint. The ground shook beneath Sarah's feet, a literal earthquake of charging apex predators. 50 tons of muscle and bone converging on a single, fragile human. "Sarah, use the collar's concussive charge! Shoot!" Arthur screamed over the radio. Sarah didn't move. She dropped the Boston Dynamics neural collar onto the dirt. It landed with a soft, useless thud. In the wild, running triggered the prey drive. Attacking triggered a defensive slaughter. Instead, Sarah did something completely antithetical to the Coalition's combat doctrine. She unclasped her helmet, letting the pressurized seal hiss, and tossed it aside, exposing her face and neck to the hot, chemical-laced air. She inhaled deeply, grounding herself. She spread her arms slightly, palms open, projecting an aura of absolute, unshakable calm. She locked eyes with the largest of the cubs, the pack leader, charging dead ahead at 60 kilometers an hour. "We are the children of Earth," Sarah thought, standing perfectly still. "We walked alongside the wolves when the world was made of ice. We do not break beasts, we bond with them." The alpha cub was 10 meters away. 5 meters. 3. Its massive jaws opened, a guttural, deafening roar tearing from its throat, aimed directly at Sarah's chest. And then, the impossible happened. The alpha didn't strike. Less than a meter from her face, the massive beast slammed its front limbs into the dirt, tearing up a massive trench of synthetic soil as it desperately killed its own momentum. The heavy creature skidded, throwing a cloud of dust over Sarah, coming to a halt so close that its hot, ragged breath ruffled her hair. The rest of the pack, reacting instantly to their leader's sudden stop, aborted their charges. They scrambled, crashing into one another and the canyon walls in their frantic effort to halt the kill strike. Silence slammed back into the arena, heavy and absolute, broken only by the heavy panting of the massive beasts. Up on the observation deck, Director Wright's smug expression evaporated, replaced by wide-eyed, uncomprehending shock. What? What is happening? Why did they stop? The chemical stimulant should have overridden any hesitation. They should be tearing her apart. General O'Neill let out a long, slow breath, a fierce, proud smile touching the corners of his mouth. "You pumped the room full of aggression stimulants, right? But you forgot one crucial variable about Earth's evolutionary tree." "What variable?" Wright demanded. His composure shattering. "Pheromonal empathy," O'Neill replied coldly. "Humans don't just feel fear. When a human experiences deep, instinctual pack-bonding empathy, our endocrine system produces oxytocin, serotonin, and a highly complex cocktail of social pheromones. It's what allowed us to domesticate apex predators on our own world. To a highly social pack animal, even an alien one, a human projecting absolute fearless dominance mixed with familial acceptance is a biological override code. Down in the arena, the dust settled. Sarah stood her ground, her eyes still locked with the Alpha. The beast was trembling violently, fighting a brutal internal war between the toxic frenzy in its blood and the overwhelming, intoxicating scent of calm and belonging radiating from the human before it. Slowly, deliberately, Sarah raised her bare right hand. The Alpha let out a confused, rumbling whine. It was a sound of immense power reduced to uncertainty. The beast lowered its massive armored head, leaning forward inch by inch. Sarah didn't flinch. She placed her palm flat against the creature's armored snout. The moment her skin made contact, a shock wave seemed to ripple through the pack. The Alpha let out a long, shuddering exhale, the toxic yellow-red glow in its eyes flickering before slowly fading back to a deep, natural amber. The beast closed its eyes and leaned its massive weight entirely into Sarah's hand, a gesture of absolute, unconditional submission. Seeing their leader yield, the remaining 5 cubs broke their aggressive formation entirely. The feral tension snapped. Instead of circling her as prey, they rushed toward her. But it wasn't a charge of violence. It was a stampede of desperate affection. They crowded around her, their massive bodies bumping against her legs, whining and chuffing like oversized, terrifying dogs. One of the cubs, a massive female with a scarred shoulder, dropped to the dirt and rolled onto her side, exposing her armored underbelly, letting out a submissive, rumbling purr that vibrated the very stones of the arena. Sarah smiled, running her hands over the thick, coarse fur and bone plates of the Alpha's neck. "Hey there," she whispered, her voice steady and warm. "I know. The air hurts your head. We'll get you out of here." "I don't believe it," Arthas whispered over the comms, his voice thick with awe. "Sarah, their biorhythms just synchronized, not just with each other, but with you. You aren't just their handler now. You're their Alpha." Suddenly, the blaring sound of a system alarm shattered the calm. "Warning! Override sequence initiated," the automated facility voice announced. "Sector 4, purge protocols activated. Incendiary venting in T-minus 60 seconds. Sarah's head snapped up. In the observation deck, Director Wright was frantically typing at a standalone terminal, his face pale with panic and fury. "This is an anomaly! A biological hazard!" Wright shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. "She has compromised the specimens. I'm initiating a localized sterilization." "Are you out of your mind?" O'Neill roared, drawing his sidearm and leveling it directly at Wright's chest. "Step away from that console, Director. Now!" Wright froze, staring at the barrel of O'Neill's weapon. "You wouldn't dare. I am a coalition director. You pull that trigger, and humanity's treaty is burned to ash. If you burn my captain," O'Neill said, his voice dropping to a lethal, icy whisper, "the treaty is the last thing you'll need to worry about." Down in the arena, Sarah heard the exchange through the open comms. The blast doors were still locked. The vents above began to hum, preparing to drop liquid fire into the chamber to erase Wright's failure and the evidence of his sabotage. She looked at the 6 massive beasts surrounding her. They were looking at her, waiting for a command, waiting for their Alpha to lead them. Sarah's eyes narrowed, shifting from warmth to cold, calculating fury. She pointed toward the reinforced blast doors leading directly to the outer maintenance corridors, and beyond that, to the command center. "Break it down," Sarah commanded. The Alpha cub let out a roar that shook the earth, and the pack charged. The command was given, and the response was absolute. 6 juvenile Tartaran predators, each weighing over 8,000 pounds of hyperdense muscle and subdermal armor, did not hesitate. They moved as a single, fluid strike force, completely unified under the silent pheromonal direction of their new human alpha. The alpha cub led the vanguard, lowering its massive, wedge-shaped skull. The reinforced blast doors were a marvel of modern engineering, forged from a proprietary blend of SpaceX titanium tungsten alloys designed to withstand a direct hit from orbital railguns. To Director Thomas Wright, they were an impenetrable barrier. To the Tartaran pack, they were just another obstacle standing between their alpha and safety. 50 tons of kinetic fury slammed into the metal. The sound was apocalyptic, a deafening, bone-rattling boom that echoed through the kilometer-wide arena and shook the suspended observation deck above. Up in the command center, alarms wailed in a frantic, overlapping crescendo. "They're hitting the doors!" Dr. Arthur Pendleton shouted over the klaxons, his fingers flying across his mechanical keyboard as he desperately tried to bypass the lockdown. "Structural integrity is dropping!" Director Wright stared at the telemetry screens, his face entirely drained of color. The smug superiority that had defined his career within the coalition was evaporating, replaced by a cold, creeping terror. "Impossible," he stammered, backing away from the console. "Those doors are rated for Class 5 kinetic impacts. A biological organism cannot breach them." General Richard O'Neill kept his sidearm leveled perfectly at Wright's chest, his expression hard as granite. "You underestimate the evolutionary perfection of an apex predator, Wright, and you severely underestimate the tactical brilliance of a human officer coordinating them." Down in the arena, the temperature was skyrocketing. The massive ceiling vents groaned, glowing a furious cherry red as the facility's localized sterilization system primed. The chemical smell of the aggression stimulants was quickly being replaced by the acrid, terrifying stench of raw thermite and refined plasma. The purge was seconds away from turning Sector 4 into a localized sun. "Hit it again!" Captain Sarah Jenkins yelled, her voice raw. She didn't need to speak their language. Her intent, her urgency, and her adrenaline-laced pheromones broadcasted her commands directly to the pack's highly sensitive olfactory receptors. The alpha roared, rearing back on its massive hind legs. The female with the scarred shoulder joined him, alongside 2 other massive males. They hit the buckling metal simultaneously. Crack! A spiderweb of fractures blossomed across the transparent aluminum viewing port of the door. The heavy locking mechanisms, engineered by General Dynamics to secure military bunkers, shrieked in protest as the steel tracks warped. "Warning! Incendiary purge in T-10 seconds!" The cold, synthesized voice of the facility AI droned. "Come on. Come on," Sarah whispered, feeling the blistering heat radiating from the ceiling above. The air was becoming too thick to breathe, scorching her lungs. The cubs felt the heat, too, whining in distress, their thick fur beginning to singe. With a final desperate surge of power, the alpha cub wedged its scythe-like talons into the fracture and ripped backward. The titanium tungsten alloy tore like wet paper. The massive hydraulic hinges blew out in a shower of sparks and hydraulic fluid, and the 50-ton blast doors collapsed outward into the maintenance corridor with a thunderous crash. "Move! Go, go, go!" Sarah commanded, pointing toward the dark, cool expanse of the corridor. The pack surged forward, entirely bypassing their natural instinct to trample. They moved around Sarah, creating a protective moving wall of armor, ushering her out of the kill zone. They cleared the threshold just as the ceiling vents above Sector 4 detonated. A waterfall of liquid white fire rained down upon the arena floor, instantly vaporizing the synthetic boulders and turning the ground into a bubbling lake of molten slag. The thermal shockwave chased them into the corridor, blowing Sarah off her feet, but a massive plated tail whipped out, catching her mid-air and setting her gently down onto the steel grate of the hallway. She looked up. The alpha cub was standing over her, panting heavily, its natural amber eyes blinking in the dim emergency lighting. It nudged her shoulder with its massive armored snout, checking on her. Sarah smiled, wiping a streak of soot from her cheek. "I'm okay, big guy. You did good." Above them, the automated PA system crackled to life, Director Wright's voice echoing through the corridor, laced with pure panic. "Automated defense turrets activated in sub-level 3. Security teams, converge on the maintenance corridors. Lethal force authorized. Kill the beasts. Kill the human." Sarah's smile vanished. The warmth of the pack bond receded, replaced by the icy, calculated focus of a front-line soldier. She reached down to her tactical belt, drawing her heavy plasma sidearm. She checked the thermal cell, the weapon letting out a high-pitched whine as it charged. "They want to play soldier?" Sarah muttered, her eyes locking onto the access elevator at the end of the hall that led directly to the command deck. She looked at the 6 massive predators flanking her, their muscles coiling, ready for violence. Let's show them how Earth goes to war. The maintenance corridor was engineered as an inescapable kill box. Recessed into the Durasteel ceiling every 50 meters were automated Raytheon Mark 7-point defense turrets, heavy Gatling lasers explicitly designed to shred heavily armored boarding parties in milliseconds. Director Wright had activated the base's internal defense grid, assuming the sheer volume of directed energy would turn the beasts to ash. As Captain Sarah Jenkins and the pack moved forward, the first turret dropped from its concealed hatch. Its crimson targeting laser cut through the thick, smoky air, attempting to lock onto the largest thermal signature in the vanguard. But humanity had spent the last 2 centuries mastering asynchronous warfare. "Flash!" Sarah shouted. She ripped a heavily modified L3 Harris tactical strobe grenade from her combat harness and hurled it precisely down the center of the corridor. The grenade detonated mid-air, flooding the hallway with a blinding, high-frequency electromagnetic pulse coupled with a multi-spectrum photoreactive flash. The automated optical sensors of the Raytheon turret short-circuited instantly. Its targeting lasers spun wildly as the internal gyroscopes burned out. The Tartaran cubs, naturally equipped with secondary nictitating membranes to survive the unfiltered solar flares of their homeworld, were completely unaffected by the blinding light. Seizing the tactical blind spot, the scarred female cub lunged. With a devastating swipe of her colossal bone-plated talons, she sheared the automated turret entirely off its reinforced ceiling mount. It crashed to the floor in a shower of brilliant blue sparks. They advanced with terrifying fluid synergy. Sarah provided the tactical oversight, neutralizing electronic countermeasures, anticipating firing arcs, and directing the momentum. The pack provided the unstoppable physical force. It was a flawless symbiotic loop, the strategic mind of a human officer paired with the supreme lethality of apex predators. Heavy blast doors at the far end of the hallway hissed open. Security teams clad in mechanized combat armor poured into the corridor, their heavy pulse rifles raised. "Open fire!" the squad leader screamed. A blinding volley of superheated plasma bolts seared down the enclosed space. Reacting with protective instinct, the alpha cub stepped directly in front of Sarah, absorbing the concentrated barrage straight to its broad chest. The energy bolts dissipated harmlessly against the creature's hyper-dense subdermal bone plates, leaving nothing but shallow scorch marks. The beast did not flinch. It planted its massive front limbs and let out a deafening, infrasonic roar. The frequency was so low and intensely powerful that it physically vibrated the mechanized armor of the security guards, causing their delicate internal stabilizers to catastrophically fail. The guards staggered drunkenly, dropping to their knees as their equilibrium shattered. Sarah didn't order a slaughter. She simply pointed past the incapacitated squad. The pack surged forward, batting the heavily armored guards aside like discarded ragdolls. They disarmed the soldiers with calculated precision, neutralizing the threat without spilling a drop of blood. They were operating as a highly disciplined shock troop unit under perfect command. In the command center, Director Wright watched the security feeds in absolute horror. The impenetrable internal defenses of Kepler 186F were being systematically dismantled. "They're at the primary blast doors," Wright whispered, backing away until his spine hit the main console. He looked at General Richard O'Neill, wild-eyed. "General, command her to stand down. They'll slaughter us all." O'Neill kept his sidearm leveled at Wright's chest. "She is a human officer, Director. She only fires upon confirmed hostiles. If you want to survive, I highly suggest you get on your knees and put your hands behind your head." Before Wright could comprehend the order, the heavy steel doors to the command deck buckled violently inward. With a terrible groan of tearing metal, the massive doors were ripped off their reinforced tracks and thrown across the room. Dust and acrid smoke billowed into the pristine command center. Out of the grey fog stepped Captain Sarah Jenkins. Her uniform was scorched, her plasma pistol lowered but ready. Flanking her were the 6 Tartaran cubs. The massive alpha stepped forward, its jaws level with Director Wright's face, letting out a localized earthquake of a growl. Wright whimpered, collapsing to his knees and throwing his shaking hands over his head. The great political mastermind, reduced to a cowering mess. Sarah holstered her weapon, stepping past the disgraced director to stand beside Dr. Arthas Pendleton. "Status, Arthas?" Arthas let out a triumphant laugh. "Wright forgot human engineers don't rely solely on localized coalition architecture. I utilized a Palantir Foundry ghost node to bypass his firewall. I routed the security feeds directly to High Command via a heavily encrypted subspace burst." General O'Neill smiled grimly. "Meaning? Meaning the entire coalition tribunal has been watching this live," Arthas beamed, pointing to the central holographic projector. The projector whirred to life, casting an amazing blue light. The towering figure of Supreme Commander Harrison materialized. "Director Wright," Harrison's voice boomed. "You initiated an unsanctioned lethal purge and attempted to murder a coalition officer. Your authority is permanently revoked. You will face a tribunal for high treason." Wright sobbed against the cold floor. Harrison turned his piercing gaze back to Sarah, his voice softening with profound awe. "Captain Jenkins, for centuries the Coalition viewed humanity as an evolutionary anomaly. Too small, too weak. We believed you were out of your depth. We failed to realize your species conquers hostile worlds, not through brute strength, but through a terrifying capacity to turn your greatest nightmares into your fiercest allies. You have completely rewritten the fundamental parameters of biological warfare." General O'Neill finally lowered his sidearm. "Effective immediately," the Supreme Commander decreed. "Humanity is granted full elite status. Furthermore, you are promoted to Major, tasked with commanding the Coalition's first interspecies vanguard. Sarah saluted crisply. "Understood, Commander." As the transmission faded, the Alpha Cub nudged Sarah's hand. Sarah laughed, scratching behind its heavy bone plates. The creature closed its amber eyes, letting out a rumbling purr. They had tried to throw humanity to the wolves, forgetting that humans were the ones who taught the wolves to heal. Now, the stars belonged to the pack. Did you enjoy this thrilling sci-fi HFY adventure? If you want to see more incredible stories where humanity proves its undeniable strength across the stars, hit that like button. Leave a comment on what alien world we should conquer next. Share this video with your fellow sci-fi fans and subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on so you never miss an epic tale.